And our episode begins with Jane having a flashback and then waking up in her regular loop where she takes Ziggy to get something to eat. But we have to remember that this is actually the 30 years ago timeline, with her flashback being in the 35 years ago timeline. This is followed up with Laura Dern in the modern timeline assuring Emma Bella that her birthday party is going to be great, even though 6 kids are going to go to Disney on Ice instead as a protest for Ziggy not being invited. Of course, later on we find out that Emma Bella is actually Ford in disguise, and Laura Dern is a host recreation of Renata from the 30 years ago timeline. And then we have Celeste talking to Perry, who's just an adult version of Ziggy, who gets upset because he's not going to Disney on Ice. He gets angry and violent with Celeste, but he thinks it's no big deal because, you know, she's just a robot host.
Chad, how can Perry be upset if he's Ziggy? Ziggy is going to Disney on Ice.
That's in the 30 years ago timeline, stupid. They're in a loop. They go to Disney on Ice all the time.
Well, I'm pretty sure that Celeste is a real human being.
What, like a sentient robot? I think that's debatable. After the Violent Delights incident, she may just be following a set programming. It's not until the Elvis Singing Battle fundraiser that she gains full control of her choices.
You're one messed up dude, Chad.
And we start out again with Dolores, because how else are we going to start an episode? Here Arnold asks Dolores what happened, and she says that her parents were murdered, so she ran away. Arnold then asks if she wants the hurt of her parents taken away, and she responds that hurt is all she has, which is a dialogue that they wrote for her. This is another hint that Bernard is a host, as he says this line last episode to his wife, who is really Ford.
Dude, finding out my wife is Ford would totally ruin my week.
Now wait a minute, we saw Dolores run away in the modern timeline, and then she shows up with William after running away in the 30 years ago timeline. This is the 35 years ago timeline. She ran away back then too?
Exactly, this is beginning to make a little bit of sense. Last time we were puzzled about why she showed up with William with no explanation. Apparently she's been running away regularly for 35 years.
Regularly? Isn't her story about coming home and seeing her parents killed and then getting raped by either a guest or Rebus?
Sure, that probably happens most of the time, but I imagine occasionally she gets away. This incident with Arnold, the time she shows up with William, and the most recent incident all happen to be lucky times that she got away.
Now, hold on. In the next scene, we have Dolores with a gun. Where did this gun come from? Didn't Ford bury a gun for her in the modern timeline?
Right, but we were also unsure if she stole Rebus's gun. This gun from 30 years ago must be Rebus's gun from 30 years ago, as Ford didn't bury a gun 30 years ago.
Okay, so it's not just in the modern timeline. Dolores has been apparently stealing guns and running away for at least 30 years. And I imagine she's been occasionally killing Rebus for decades because somehow she's been getting close enough to him to get his gun and getting away with his gun. She's been in the same loop that starts with Rebus's gun and reminds her of Escalante, and therefore she ends up returning there all the time. Fine. So if Rebus's gun is the one that has the significance or is just as good, what the hell's the point of Ford burying this other gun and having Dolores go out and find it? What the hell's the point of Violent Delights or the photo or any of that? Rebus's gun was already triggering Dolores to go to Escalante and trying to find the center of the maze.
You know, Ford was doing it for fun, entertainment.
He already has his family robots and talking to Bernard on Skype and pretending to be his wife and cutting up his workers' stuff. How much more entertainment does one man need?
So next we have the player piano playing A Forest by The Cure, and then we get back to Maeve.
I can already feel the headache coming on.
So in this scene, Maeve suddenly begins to remember the incident where she was shot. In episode 2, when Maeve was rescued from being decommissioned by Elsie, Elsie noted that she had physical pain in her abdomen and tagged her for a physical. During the physical, they found the bullet, but before it was removed, Maeve woke up, and so I imagine Felix and Sylvester put her back into Westworld without removing the bullet. Maeve now remembers the incident of being shot and remembers hearing commands being given to Clementine. She also remembers the Westworld workers and being rushed out before the bullet could be removed. Maeve snaps out of it, goes home, feels the bullet inside her, draws a picture, and then goes to hide it, but then, crazy shocker, she finds a whole slew of pictures.
Yeah, it's a great shocker, but what? There was like a week's worth of pictures in there. I thought it's been like 2 days since the Violent Delights incident. When exactly was Maeve shot? In her memory, Maeve is hearing Clementine's commands, so I would suspect that she was shot after the Violent Delight incident. Except we know what happens to Maeve directly after the Violent Delight incident. She freezes up. She's reviewed by Narrative, who ups her aggression. That immediately doesn't work out. She's ordered to be decommissioned. Teresa tries to save the decommissioned hosts, but doesn't save Maeve. And then Elsie randomly saves her and identifies the pain. So this means that Maeve was acting funny before the Violent Delights incident, which I suppose makes some sense considering the Man in Black visited her a year ago, but it also makes the Violent Delights incident irrelevant. Now, it's also worth noting that we actually hear why Maeve was put on the floor with the bullet still in her. QA was demanding that she be out there really quick, because that's totally what a quality assurance shop would do. Now, this would make one suspect that there would be a QA conspiracy surrounding Maeve, except that it's QA that decommissions her, and QA fails to save her, and really Elsie from behavior randomly saving her is the only reason Maeve is still in the game. Not to mention it was Narrative who removed the record of cognitive dissonance, and it was Livestock who acted like a bunch of absolute fucking idiots. We know there's some sort of conspiracy around Maeve as someone programmed her to do all of this, but it seems to be a conspiracy of luck and incompetence.
So next we get back to Elsie, who's trying to make sense of the woodcutter incident. Teresa is unhappy with her work and decides to take over. No one would ever suspect that Teresa has something to hide with that move. Elsie is of course pissed and says that there's a pattern with Abernathy and the woodcutter. She then shows Bernard her picture of Orion, which isn't Orion. Bernard lets her know that that isn't Orion and that she's imagining things. I imagine this is supposed to be a metaphor for the connection that she sees between the woodcutter and Abernathy, since the woodcutter is flipping out because he's programmed to steal data, and Abernathy saw a picture.
Maybe the metaphor is for Violent Delights. Maybe there's no connection between Abernathy, Dolores, and Maeve with that line. After all, we found out that Maeve and Dolores were acting funny before the Violent Delights incident. And in the end, we find out that Abernathy was triggered by a random picture.
Ford planned it all! This brings us to William, who wants to take Dolores back to Sweetwater. Logan says no and suspects that Dolores has been planted here because she's William's type. He notes the remarkable coincidence that the one girl William likes at Sweetwater has ended up here.
Logan would be excellent at cinema sins. We then make it back to the Man in Black and Lawrence as they follow the Blood Arroyo looking for snakes laying eggs because Lawrence's daughter told them that for some unknown reason. In the end, they find the snake is actually the tattoo on Armistice, which of course makes zero sense. There's no reason Lawrence's daughter's idea of a maze would manifest as a riddle, and even if it did, there's no reason the daughter would know Armistice or the tattoo, and even if she knew Armistice, she wouldn't know where she was hanging out. But even if she did know all of that, there's no way the daughter would know the tattoo's backstory, which was only created last episode when Ford uploaded the Wyatt story. Lawrence's daughter tells the Man in Black about the snake in episode 2.
Anyway, the Man in Black is captured and then meets Armistice, and he's surprised that he's never met her before. I'm surprised too, as she's a 35-year-old host, and the Safe Heist is a pretty big event in Sweetwater. But, well, maybe that was a new storyline. The Man in Black then joins Armistice's crew by killing 2 men to make room for himself and Lawrence. We then get a little trickery scene with Stubbs and the whereabouts of Dolores. In this scene, Stubbs finds out that Dolores has left her loop. Of course, the viewer thinks that they're talking about William and Dolores, but no, they're actually talking about modern Dolores. We last saw her riding off, and we have no idea what she's up to. Stubbs then dispatches someone to pick Dolores up. 30 years ago, Dolores is then shown talking to Lawrence's daughter, who is sketching an image of the maze. Dolores then has some flashbacks and remembers Escalante, the girl, as well as the gun. Not to mention Dolores digging for something in her own grave. A man then arrives to retrieve Dolores, which a viewer would think is from Stubbs, but this is another trick. Apparently, a different security team from 30 years ago also dispatched someone to find Dolores. Now, in modern times, Ford's news story was disrupting security's ability to tell if she was with a guest. Here, there's no explanation for why they wouldn't have known that she was with William. We then get this little scene where Armistice needs to confirm some information that she already knew, and then kills the men delivering the information. It's a pretty useless scene, just here to establish that Armistice is nuts. We then get a scene with William and Dolores, where William asks Dolores where she's heading, since he didn't get the chance to ask earlier.
Didn't get the chance? They've been together a full day with nothing to do but ride and talk. How has he not had the chance?
Anyway, Dolores talks about how she used to believe in paths, but then she remembers herding cattle, and often one would get lost. She would worry about the lost ones, but in the end, Their path was to slaughter anyway. She then has a flashback and remembers Westworld workers dealing with bodies.
By the way, don't you think it's weird that the outfits used by the employees haven't changed over 30 years? I mean, this is what Maeve remembers. As you can see, same exact smock, same exact helmet. Even Quaker Oats and Texas Instrument calculators change more than this. And, hey, wait a minute. Isn't that the bartender who replaced Dolores' father in the first episode? He's in the modern timeline, not the 30 years ago timeline. That certainly looks like his friggin' mustache.
Well, to be fair, we have no idea what Dolores' father looked like in the 30 years ago timeline. Anyway, we pop forward 30 years and some guy tries to thank the Man in Black for his Foundation's work, and the Man in Black tells him to shut up and to stop ruining his vacation.
Same thing happened to me when I ran into Bill Gates at an Applebee's in Orlando.
The Man in Black then proceeds to tell Armistice that he'll spring Hector for her in exchange for the story about her tattoo. She wants to know why he has interest, and he proceeds to tell of Arnold and how he died in the park. He wants to know about the maze to reveal a game of real stakes and real violence.
I guess West Baltimore has been totally cleaned up in this universe.
And so we next find the Man in Black and Lawrence arrested. The Man in Black offers the policeman escort a cigar, and he takes them. The Man in Black then proceeds to tell Lawrence that none of his choices are actually his, and he is here to set him free. Now, this is interestingly the only glimmer of charity that we get from the Man in Black. At least the elderly Man in Black. Young William perhaps wants to save the hosts, but old William simply wants a game with real stakes. For himself, it seems. And so Lawrence and the Man in Black arrive at prison, where Lawrence is to be executed and the Man in Black has to escape his cell. This is likely another callback to the original Westworld movie, where our hero is broken out of prison through a smuggled-in explosive. In prison, the Man in Black meets Hector before using his smuggled-in explosive to blow the door and kill the policeman. These explosions are all approved by Stubbs and security. Hector and the Man in Black then kill all of the policemen right before Lawrence's execution.
Now this is fun and all, but I'm not sure why the Man in Black would allow Hector to be part of the firefight. The Man in Black seems to totally forget that he's bulletproof. Hector isn't, and he needs to remain alive for Armistice. Seems like an unnecessary risk.
Maybe he wanted to make sure he saved Lawrence.
Why? What good is Lawrence?
Well, he needs him later to save Teddy.
Yeah, but he doesn't know that. Lawrence is completely expendable at this point. Logically speaking, the Man in Black should have kept Hector safe and sound inside until all the police were killed. So the Man in Black then returns with Hector and tells Hector that he won't find what he's looking for in the safe that he plans on stealing. So it sounds like the Man in Black did know about the safe heist. In fact, he knows about the safe heist so well that he's apparently gotten into the safe himself to find out that it was empty. If that's the case, how has he never met Armistice? Was she only recently added to Hector's team? Was Hector getting broken out of prison by a completely different host? Anyway, the Man in Black finally gets to hear about Armistice's tattoo, and she tells of Wyatt and his masked men. They murdered her whole village, including her whole family, and so she's been hunting them down one by one, adding pieces to her tattoo, with only the head for Wyatt remaining uncolored. Now, of course, this Wyatt story is completely new and only recently put into Westworld by Ford. The fact that this storyline does eventually lead the Man in Black to finding out about the maze is pure and utter luck. Remember, the Man in Black found a maze symbol drawn in a field by some American Indians, so he talked to an American Indian dealer who also had the symbol on his scalp. Before he died, the dealer told about Lawrence's daughter, who told a riddle about a snake, who led the Man in Black to Armistice, who tells of Ford's new storyline. Somehow, an odd hidden quest written into 35-year-old subroutines has transitioned seamlessly into a story that's a few days old. I mean, I imagine that if the Man in Black had gotten to Armistice a few days ago, she would have a completely different story about her tattoo. She would have to say, I lost a bet, or I got drunk in Pariah, and the Man in Black would be SOL.
So next we find Maeve and the rest of Sweetwater gawking at some American Indians as they pass through town for the train. A girl drops a toy, clearly based on a Westworld worker, and Maeve wants to know what it means. The soldier says it's part of their religion.
Yeah, this is an awful lot of information for people who regularly have their memories erased. No worker noticed that toy when servicing the robots and resetting loops?
Well, since we find out in the end that this is all part of Maeve's storyline, I'm guessing that all of these people have been programmed to say this for her.
I guess.
So after this, we have a quick scene of Maeve recognizing one of Hector's bandits as he scopes her brothel. Clementine mentions that Hector lives with the Savages, which immediately makes Maeve think that maybe he has answers about her flashbacks. It's a remarkable amount of information about her memories in a short amount of time, which really does make it seem like it's a planned storyline for her. It's a damn good thing Elsie randomly saved her and Felix and Sylvester were doofuses, or else all of this programming would have gone to waste. Anyway, we then get a scene with Bernard and Teresa where she mentions that she's gonna go have lunch with Ford. And so she goes to meet him and he's having massive progress on digging. How many days has it been since this narrative started? 4? I actually have no idea. It's confusing enough with the 35 years ago, 30 years ago, 1 year ago, and modern timelines. But the modern timeline doesn't seem to make much sense on its own. Here in episode 4, the man in black says it's only been 1 day since the murder of Lawrence's wife in episode 2. But way too much stuff has happened with everyone else for it to be only 1 day, so who knows? Teresa and Ford then sit for lunch, and Teresa lets Ford know that the board is concerned about his new narrative. Ford then proceeds to weirdly threaten Teresa by sitting her at the same table that she sat at as a child and freezing all the workers to show that he has complete control over everything. And he lets Teresa know that he knows about her and Bernard. Now, I'm actually not sure what threatening Teresa actually accomplishes. He finishes lunch by saying that the narrative will be completed on time, and a big futuristic rock crusher comes in. Couldn't he have just had a nice lunch and then told her that everything would be fine? It seems kind of dumb to make insane threatening remarks with hints of violence when he's actually secretly planning on murdering everyone in the end. Plus, it ruins a nice lunch.
And then we get back to William and Logan for a big old shootout. They found Slim Miller and Logan is giddy about shooting everybody up. And that's what they do. It's bang, bang, baggity bang, 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 bangity bang. But man, it's lucky for Slim Miller that Logan runs out of bullets. They take the criminal alive.
And then we get back to the man in black and Lawrence, where Lawrence weirdly knows about Teddy's failed assault on Wyatt for some reason.
I guess someone in Armistice's group told him about it?
If Armistice's group knew about it, why isn't Armistice going off to kill Wyatt?
Well, she has to go get that safe, remember?
She values the safe over vengeance? Unlikely. She has a tattoo on her face reminding her to go kill Wyatt.
Anyway, the two find Teddy tied to a tree dying after his failed mission to kill Wyatt. So it appears it hasn't been too long since the new Wyatt storyline began. And then we go back 30 years where Logan and William's captive, Slim, offers them a bribe if, instead of turning him in, they take him to his boss, El Lazo. Now eventually we find out that El Lazo is Lawrence, and incidentally, El Lazo means noose in Spanish. The man in black seems to be making a joke by making Lawrence wear the noose all the time. Anyway, Logan is totally game for the new side quest of finding El Lazo and Pariah, and so he kills the bounty hunter and convinces William to come with him on his new adventure. And finally, we have the safe heist again. This time the music is Habanera from Carmen. The heist begins normally enough, but when Hector enters the brothel, he is met with a gun from Maeve. She brings him upstairs and offers the combination to the safe in exchange for knowledge on her flashbacks. He lets her know that they are shades, men who walk between worlds to oversee their world. A family is coming into town, and so Stubbs orders that the criminals be disposed of quickly. Maeve then demands that Hector cut a bullet from inside her to prove that her flashbacks are real. And so he stabs her, finds the bullet, they make out, and then they get gunned down.
Oh man, so awesome and a typical Friday night for Chad Summerchild. But you know, without the gunning down, or the bullet, or the stabbing, or the making out.